If they don't recognize you anymore, good. That means the old version of you finally died in peace. Something shifted. You didn't make an announcement. You didn't post a transformation photo. You didn't even change your number. But suddenly, they're whispering, watching, weirdly distant, saying things like, "You've changed." No, correction, you evolved. Here's the thing they won't admit. They weren't expecting you to outgrow your trauma, your silence, your insecurities, or them. And now, you're unrecognizable, spiritually, emotionally, energetically. According to psychology, when people can't categorize or control someone anymore, they often label that person as arrogant, weird, or different. Translation: you no longer serve the version of you they felt superior to. They say you look different. But what they're really feeling is the weight of your new spiritual rank, and it's messing with their nervous system. You didn't just switch lanes, you left the road entirely and started flying. This version of you isn't just freaking them out, it's threatening everything they built their comfort on. So buckle up, because in this video, we're going to unpack why your transformation is shaking tables, exposing hearts, and making folks low-key allergic to your presence. And yes, some of them need Benadryl at this point. Let's get into it. Number one, they're not confused, they're convicted. They're not confused, they're convicted. There's a big difference. Confusion means they don't understand what happened to you, but that's not the case. Deep down, they do understand exactly what changed. They're just not ready to admit that your transformation is forcing them to confront parts of themselves they've been avoiding for years. You didn't do anything to them, you just evolved, quietly. But the new you is shining a bright light on their shadows, and it's uncomfortable. You didn't walk around preaching, you didn't announce that you were healing or elevating or becoming. But now, when you walk into a room, something shifts. Conversations get awkward, energy gets weird. You're not doing anything out of the ordinary, you're just existing in truth. And the weight of that truth exposes the lies they've been living in. They can't explain why your presence suddenly makes them second-guess themselves. It's because you now carry a clarity that confronts their confusion. You carry peace and they're still addicted to chaos. You've grown into someone they once mocked, doubted, or dismissed. And now your presence reads like a reminder of everything they didn't choose for themselves. They're not inspired, they're uncomfortable. Because while you were growing in silence, they were busy gossiping. While you were healing in the dark, they were laughing at the version of you they thought was weak. Now the tables have turned and you didn't flip them. Life did. So they say you're different. But the truth is you're whole. You no longer match their frequency, so they call it attitude. You no longer engage with dysfunction, so they call it pride. But none of that is real. What's real is the mirror your transformation has become, and that reflection is louder than any words you could say. They're not confused. They just never expected you to become the version of yourself they'd have to reckon with. Number two, you didn't just glow up, you ascended. People think this is about looks, like you just switched your style, got a new haircut, or upgraded your wardrobe. That's the shallow way of seeing it. The real shift goes much deeper. It's spiritual, it's internal, it's energetic. What they're seeing isn't a makeover, it's evidence of a full transformation. You don't just look different, you feel different. Your presence hits different. Your aura walks in the room before you do, and it's undeniable. This shift didn't come from vanity, it came from pain, from choosing healing when it would have been easier to stay broken, from letting go of people who drained you, even when you loved them, from walking away from environments that didn't see your value, even when they were familiar. You didn't just clean up your outer life, you did soul work, and now it shows. The weight you dropped wasn't just physical. You dropped emotional baggage, mental clutter, spiritual debris, and now your face carries light. Your voice carries truth. Your walk carries purpose. And let's be honest, people don't know how to deal with that kind of change. It confuses them, it intimidates them, because the old you was easy to dismiss, easy to label, easy to overlook. But this version of you, they can't pin you down anymore. You're not seeking their approval. You're not performing for attention, you're walking in your assignment. You've stopped trying to prove yourself, and that's what scares them most. Because when someone really ascends, they stop responding to everything. They stop clapping back, they stop competing, they operate from peace, not pressure, from calling, not clout. So yes, to them, you look brand new. But this isn't about new clothes or trends. This is what happens when someone rises into who they were always meant to be. What they're witnessing is divine elevation, and it has nothing to do with filters and everything to do with favor. You didn't glow up, you ascended. Number 3, you've outgrown their language. You've outgrown their language, and that's why they feel so disconnected from you now. It's not beef. It's not drama. You're just not available on the same channel anymore. The way you speak, move, feel, and discern, none of it matches their old programming. You're no longer operating from fear, guilt, or people-pleasing. You speak from awareness now. You lead with alignment, and they're still speaking from survival, from ego, from unhealed wounds. That's why the conversations feel forced. That's why the jokes don't land anymore. That's why being around them suddenly feels exhausting instead of familiar. You used to decode their passive-aggressive comments, laugh at their subtle jabs, and smooth over their emotional messes. Not because you agreed, but because your spirit used to translate dysfunction as love. Not anymore. You've switched to a higher frequency, one that values clarity, boundaries, growth, and truth. You don't do guilt trips. You don't entertain shade disguised as sarcasm. You're not here for trauma bonding or fake support. They don't know how to reach you now because manipulation doesn't work when your spirit is no longer available to be bent. The bond they thought would last forever, it was built on an outdated version of you, the version that kept quiet to keep peace, the version that tolerated chaos in the name of loyalty. But once you started healing, that bond turned into static. You can't build with people who refuse to grow. You can't flow with people stuck in loops. You're evolving and they're recycling. Now your energy does the talking. Your presence speaks volumes. And those who haven't upgraded their emotional vocabulary, they feel that distance and call it attitude. But it's not attitude, it's ascension. You're no longer explaining what your spirit naturally recognizes. You don't need words to know who's real. You feel it. And if they can't meet you there, they can't meet you at all. Number 4. You became what they secretly feared you'd become, untouchable. You became what they secretly feared you'd become, untouchable. And that's not just about strength. It's about resilience on a level they never thought you'd reach. You were supposed to crumble. That was the silent wish buried in their fake support and backhanded compliments. They threw words like knives, hoping your self-worth would bleed out. They thought the betrayal would leave you bitter, insecure, maybe even stuck. But you did the unthinkable. You grew through it. They saw you take hit after hit, and instead of folding, you absorbed the impact and let it refine you. Every lie, every disappointment, every silent rejection, you used it as fuel. You didn't get petty. You got focused. You didn't get revenge. You got revelation. You didn't lose your mind. You found your power. And now the version of you walking through life, calm, centered, unshakable, that unnerves them more than any revenge ever could. There's a stillness to you now that makes people nervous, not because you're cold, but because you no longer respond to chaos like you used to. You're not triggered by nonsense. You don't get pulled into emotional traps. You don't beg for clarity or closure. That calm you carry, it's earned. It's sacred. And most importantly, it's proof you've healed in places most people refuse to even look. You've become someone who can't be baited. Someone who no longer dances with dysfunction. Someone who walks into rooms and makes energy shift without saying a word. That's what they feared. Not your anger, not your sadness, your wholeness. Because now they can't guilt you, they can't gaslight you, and they definitely can't figure out how you're still standing. They wanted a reaction. What they got instead was your evolution. And that's why you feel untouchable, because you stopped letting broken people decide your worth. And now nothing they do can reach the version of you they never saw coming. Number 5. They can't place you anymore because you burned the mold. They can't place you anymore because you burned the mold they tried to fit you into. You're not who they assumed you'd always be. You don't fit their storylines, their roles, their expectations. And that's messing with their sense of control. People love categories, they love labels. It makes them feel safe, like they understand you, like they can predict your moves. But the version of you that stands here now, you shattered every box they ever tried to put you in. They thought you'd be the quiet one forever, the weak one, the helper, the one who tolerated disrespect just to keep the peace, the one who never spoke up, never walked away, never chose themselves. They built their confidence around that idea of you, but life put you through a fire and it burned off everything false. You didn't just heal, you unlearned. You outgrew the identities that were never yours in the first place. Now you walk differently, not arrogantly, but freely, authentically, and it makes them nervous because they can't manipulate what they can't define. You're not the too nice one anymore. You're not the easy to guilt one. You're not the always available one. You've become someone who responds from purpose, not pressure. Someone who sees clearly, speaks intentionally, and moves without asking for permission. They keep trying to find the old you in the new version. But that person doesn't live here anymore, that mold. You didn't just step out of it, you torched it. And in doing so, you made it clear. You are not here to play a role. You are not here to be digestible, palatable, or predictable. You are raw, you are divine, you are unbranded. That scares people, especially those who only understand control, hierarchy, and compliance. But you've chosen freedom, and freedom always confuses those who are still trying to master captivity. Number 6. You look foreign because you've been recoded. You look foreign to them now because you've been completely recoded, not just emotionally, not just mentally, but spiritually. You've undergone a transformation at the cellular level, where who you were had to be stripped down so who you're called to be could rise. This isn't surface-level change, this is soul-level rewiring. Your mindset, your instincts, your responses, even your silence, it all carries a different frequency now. They don't recognize you because the old blueprint no longer exists. The way you move now doesn't follow their logic. You're walking in miracles, in alignment, in purpose, and they can't trace it. You're protected in ways they can't explain. You're blessed in rooms they thought you'd never enter. You're sustained through storms that should have taken you out. They keep trying to figure out how you're doing it, what your strategy is, who's backing you, where your resources are coming from. But the truth is, your access is spiritual. You've been recoded by divine instruction. There's an anointing on you that doesn't respond to natural laws. It overrides statistics, history, generational patterns, even personal flaws. That's why they're confused, because their entire understanding of life is rooted in logic, effort, and status. But your rise, it doesn't make sense by their system. Your peace, undeniable yet untraceable. Your glow, consistent even when circumstances say it shouldn't be. They don't understand how you're winning because they weren't there when God rewrote your software in silence. They didn't see the midnight breakdowns, the spiritual surgery, the pruning, the isolation. They only see the result, not the resurrection. And that makes you look alien to people still bound by formulas and performance. They're frustrated because their tools don't work on you anymore. Manipulation fails, guilt doesn't stick. Jealousy has no effect. You're operating from a new code, and unless they're spiritually tuned in, they'll never be able to figure you out. And maybe that's the point. You're not meant to be understood, you're meant to be watched while heaven keeps writing the next line of your story. Number 7. Your boundaries are now fangs. Your boundaries are now fangs, and that's why people are backing up. Not because you're aggressive, but because you're no longer accessible in the way they once enjoyed. You're not just healed, you're armed. And that protection didn't come from bitterness, it came from wisdom. You learned the hard way that access to you is a privilege, not a default setting. You're not hard to love, you're just no longer easy to use. They call you distant because they're not used to this version of you. The version that doesn't explain, overextend, or apologize for choosing peace. You used to bend yourself in half trying to be enough, to be liked, to be accepted. Now, you don't shrink to fit into rooms, you walk into them whole. You don't dilute your truth for fragile egos. You say what you mean, and you mean it with love and boundaries. People who were comfortable with the old you, the one who didn't speak up, who tolerated disrespect, who said yes to keep the peace, can't figure out how to reach you now. They think you've changed, and they're right. But what really unsettles them is that you've upgraded your protection system. You're not just putting up walls, you're filtering energy. You don't engage with chaos. You don't argue with projection. You don't explain sacred things to people who treat them like gossip. You've become selective, not out of arrogance, but out of alignment. You guard your time, your heart, your presence like they're holy ground because now you understand they are. Your boundaries aren't barriers. They're evidence of healing, evidence that you finally know your worth and you're no longer willing to bleed for people who wouldn't even hand you a Band-Aid. This version of you doesn't beg to belong. You belong to yourself now. And for people who only loved you when you were shrinking, that's the scariest thing you could have ever done. Number 8. Your silence isn't peaceful, it's dangerous. Your silence isn't peaceful to them, it's dangerous. It used to be easy to read you, easy to get a reaction, to press your buttons, to pull you into drama. Back then you'd over-explain, defend yourself, try to keep the peace even when it was costing you your voice. But that version of you is long gone. Now, you just let your silence speak. And that silence is loud to the people who used to thrive off your uncertainty. They're uncomfortable because they don't know what you're thinking anymore. You don't vent to them. You don't ask for their validation. You don't justify your choices. You just move, and that movement without explanation feels threatening. Why? Because your old responses used to give them a sense of control. Now they're guessing, and they don't like that. You've become unpredictable, and people can't manipulate what they can't read. You used to let your emotions explain everything. Now you let your boundaries do the talking. You don't shout, you don't chase, you don't argue. And that scares people more than any loud confrontation ever could. Silence forces people to sit with their own behavior. It removes the distraction of your reaction and leaves them face to face with their intentions. And let's be honest, some people depended on your need to be understood. They knew as long as you kept trying to explain yourself, they could keep you tangled in conversations that drained you. But now you've realized that understanding is not a requirement for your peace. You've tapped into a new kind of power, the kind that doesn't argue with fools or dance with dysfunction. Your silence makes them uncomfortable because it's not emptiness, it's strength, it's spiritual authority, it's discipline. It's the sound of someone who no longer needs to beg to be respected, heard, or loved. You've become a mystery to those who once thought they had you figured out. And nothing shakes small-minded people more than realizing they lost access and didn't even hear the door close. Number 9. You're not playing God, you're finally walking with Him. You're not playing God, you're finally walking with Him. And that's a big difference. People who used to manipulate your kindness now look at your confidence and call it pride. They confuse your spiritual alignment with ego because they were comfortable when you were doubting yourself, second-guessing your voice, and constantly seeking their approval. But you're not in that space anymore. You've stepped into divine clarity, and it shows. You're not trying to be in control. You're just finally in agreement with your calling. You're not trying to act like you know it all. You just know who you belong to now. That knowing has changed your posture. You don't argue like you used to. You don't beg to be understood. You don't explain your every move, because when you walk with God, you realize not everything sacred needs to be explained to the wrong audience. What they see as arrogance is really spiritual rest. You're grounded, anchored, unbothered. You're not rushing, not competing, not desperate, because you've realized that what's for you can't be stolen, delayed, or destroyed. You're walking in discernment now, and that discernment is sharp. You can see through fake love. You can feel hidden motives. You can hear the tension behind the compliments. That's why you don't fall for everything with a smile on it anymore. You're no longer led by guilt or pity, because those were the tools used to keep you small. You've stepped into divine authority, not to dominate others, but to stop being dominated by their dysfunction. You're not cold, you're clear, you're not detached, you're aligned. And that terrifies people who benefited from your confusion. When you walk with God, you don't just shine, you disrupt. You remind people of what they've ignored in themselves. That's why they talk, that's why they distance, that's why they label you. But none of it sticks anymore, because you finally remember who sent you and why. And that truth walks in front of you like a fire they can't put out. Number 10, they miss who you were because that version served them. They don't miss you. They miss the version of you that made their lives easier. The version that didn't have boundaries. The one who made room for everyone else, even when it meant shrinking yourself. That old you was manageable, predictable, easy to guilt, easy to silence, easy to control. You were the go-to fixer, the emotional sponge, the one who absorbed everyone's problems and never asked for anything in return. And they loved that version because it kept you accessible, convenient, and useful. But that version of you is gone. The real you woke up. And now? You call out dysfunction without shouting. You discern energy without needing receipts. You don't argue. You exit. You no longer beg to be seen because you finally see yourself. And that shift, it's loud, even when you're quiet. You've stopped explaining your boundaries. You've stopped entertaining fake peace and one-sided loyalty. You no longer feel obligated to carry what was never yours to begin with, and that's what disturbs them. They weren't attached to your soul. They were attached to your sacrifice. They were addicted to your availability, not your authenticity. So now that you've pulled your energy back and started protecting it like it's sacred currency, they're uncomfortable. Not because you've become someone new, but because you finally stopped playing the role they cast you in. You're not rude, you're rooted. You're not distant, you're divinely guarded. You're no longer offering unlimited access to people who can't meet you with respect. And the ones who were used to feasting on your empathy without ever feeding your spirit, they're starving now. You were their emotional buffet, always open, always giving, always absorbing. But that buffet is closed, permanently. Now you serve discernment, boundaries, and truth. And the ones who can't sit at that table, they're the ones saying you've changed. And you have. You finally changed for you. Number 11, you look different because you see different. You look different because you see different. The shift in your appearance isn't just about how you dress or carry yourself. It's about the way your spirit sees through the noise now. Your perception has changed everything. You no longer walk with your head down trying to be accepted. You walk with clarity. And that clarity sharpened your posture, your presence, and your path. You're not chasing validation anymore because you finally see it for what it is, a temporary fix for a deeper void. You used to overperform, overgive, overexplain just to feel enough. But now, you know your worth doesn't depend on applause or approval. You don't need their compliments to feel beautiful. You don't need their permission to feel called. You've learned to validate yourself, and that inner knowing changed the way the world sees you. Your discernment has matured. It's no longer based on vibes or assumptions. It's precise. It's surgical. You can spot hidden intentions behind kind words. You can feel energy shift before anything is even said. You can read the room before you speak. And that kind of clarity makes people nervous, especially those who used to manipulate your kindness for their comfort. People who thought they'd always have access to you are realizing that access has been revoked, not with bitterness, but with boundaries, not with drama, but with distance. You've simply stopped entertaining what doesn't align. And that decision made you look like a stranger to people who were only familiar with the version of you that tolerated everything. They don't understand how you became so clear, so confident, so unbothered. It's because you finally opened your spiritual eyes, and that changed your entire reflection. Now you move with purpose. You speak with intention. You show up whole. And to those still stuck in shallow perception, you'll always look different. But it's not that you changed overnight, it's that you woke up and started seeing through the eyes of truth instead of trauma. Number 12, they can't laugh with you because you've become the joke's end. They can't laugh with you anymore because you've become the joke's end. You're not their punchline, their project, or their pity case. And that's a problem for them. The very things they once laughed at, rolled their eyes at, or used as ammunition, your sensitivity, your bold dreams, your quiet spirit, have now become the very traits that set you apart. You didn't change for applause. You stayed true to who you were, even when they mocked it. And now that truth has crowned you with favor. They can't explain an access they can't replicate. They used to joke about your feelings like emotional depth was a weakness. They saw your compassion as naivety, your stillness as passivity, your vision as delusion. But you weren't weak. You were just tuned into something they weren't ready to understand. And now that the evidence of your growth is undeniable, the same people who laughed the loudest suddenly have nothing to say around you. There's an awkwardness now, a weird tension in the air, because they don't know how to engage with someone they once dismissed. You're no longer broken in the right places for them to feel superior. You no longer shrink to make them feel tall. You're healed in all the areas they used to poke at for entertainment. And without your wounds on display, they don't know what to do with you. You've outgrown their humor because it was never rooted in joy. It was rooted in control. They needed you small so they could feel big, but you rising, that wasn't part of their joke. You flipping the script, that wasn't in their plan. Now the tables have turned, and you're not even gloating. You're just walking in truth, and that alone is too loud for people who once laughed at your pain. The spotlight's different now, and so are you. You're no longer the setup to their punchline. You're the one who stood through it, healed from it, and became the proof that what they mocked was actually divine. Number 13, you're not dramatic, you're delivered. You're not dramatic, you're delivered. But because you no longer play small or edit yourself for comfort, they try to slap labels on you to make sense of what they can't control. They call you too much, extra, over the top. Not because you are, but because you've stopped being muted. You used to tone yourself down, shrink your emotions, dull your passion, and hide your brilliance just to avoid making others uncomfortable. But not anymore. You've stepped into wholeness, and that makes people nervous. Why? Because we live in a world that profits off people being broken. Broken minds buy more. Broken hearts settle for less. Broken spirits stay quiet. So when someone heals, truly heals, it challenges the systems around them. You don't just glow differently, you move differently. You speak with weight, you walk with authority, you stand in your truth unapologetically. And to people still living in performance, your authenticity feels loud. They call your confidence arrogance because they're used to you second-guessing yourself. They call your discernment judgmental because they can't manipulate you anymore. They call your boundaries rude because they can't access you the way they used to. But all of that noise, it's projection. What they're really saying is, I don't know how to deal with a version of you that isn't begging for crumbs anymore. You're not intense, you're just finally whole. You're not moody, you're just no longer tolerating anything that dishonors your peace. You're not hard to be around, and you're just unwilling to be around anything fake. Your healing has made you a mirror, and when people look at you now, they're forced to face what they've ignored in themselves. That's what they can't stand. Not your fire, not your voice, not your standards. What unsettles them is that your deliverance means you no longer need their approval to breathe deeply, live loudly, and love yourself fully. And that kind of freedom, it's disruptive, it's rebellious, and it's exactly what they were hoping you'd never find. Number 14, the real flex. You didn't announce this version, the real flex. You didn't announce this version. You didn't post a transformation speech. You didn't throw shade or send subliminals. You didn't even whisper a warning. You just showed up different, quiet, grounded, whole, no theatrics, no dramatic exits. Just a silent evolution that spoke louder than any performance ever could. That's what's shaking them. It wasn't loud. It was real. And real always disrupts illusions. You didn't beg for congratulations. You didn't call a press conference to say you've healed, elevated, and moved on. You simply stopped participating in the patterns that kept you stuck. You cut cords with energy that drained you. You walked away from conversations that dishonored you. And then you glowed. You started to glow in a way that no filter could imitate because it came from actual inner work, not curated image. What throws them off is that you did it without their approval. The old you would have looked for applause, confirmation, reassurance. But this version of you doesn't need a sound check. You're not waiting to be validated. You are the validation. You're not performing, you're living, you're not clapping back, you're climbing forward, quietly. Now they're scrambling, trying to figure out what changed, what sparked it, what happened. But they'll never fully understand it because this kind of transformation isn't cosmetic, it's spiritual. And spiritual shifts don't come with warning signs. They arrive like revelation, sudden, undeniable, divine. You didn't get louder, you just stopped dimming in that silence, that peace, that unbothered, unannounced, untouchable presence. That's the real power. The old you may have needed the crowd to clap. The new you walks off the stage before the applause even starts because your peace is the standing ovation now. So here you are now, no longer performing, no longer pretending, no longer digestible for the comfort of others. You didn't just change, you evolved. You grew into the version of yourself that doesn't chase, doesn't beg, and doesn't shrink. You walk in alignment, not applause. And that's what disturbs them the most, because the truth is, you were never meant to stay small. You were never meant to stay broken just so others could feel whole. You were never meant to be the emotional landfill for people who never intended to grow. That version of you, silent, uncertain, overly accessible, served them, but it was killing you. And now finally you've chosen you. They can't figure you out anymore because you're not who you were. And that's not your burden to carry. You've been recoded, realigned, and spiritually reestablished. And that comes with a different posture. You move with purpose now. Your silence is intentional. Your presence is piercing. Your peace is non-negotiable. You are no longer a character in their script. You're the author of your own. And you don't need to explain the plot twist to people who are only reading your life for entertainment. This new version of you didn't need a rebrand. You didn't need an audience. You just needed alignment. And now that you have it, you glow differently. So let them wonder, let them talk, let them watch. Because while they're busy trying to figure out how you did it, heaven is still writing chapters they'll never be able to predict. You're not loud, you're not flashy, you're just undeniably transformed. And that is the flex they'll never recover from. This message lit something inside you. Don't let it stop here. Subscribe to the channel right now, because this space is for those who are rising, evolving, healing, and refusing to play small ever again. Like this video if you're done apologizing for your growth. Comment below and let me know which part hit you the hardest. I read every word. Your voice matters here. Share this with someone who's quietly becoming everything they were told they could never be. Sometimes one word can remind them they're not crazy. They're chosen. This isn't just content. This is confirmation. This is your tribe. This is your reminder that you didn't come this far to stay the same. So subscribe, stay connected, and come back for more, because every time you show up here, something in you rises higher. Let's keep growing. Let's keep glowing. And let's keep making them uncomfortable with truth.